Noor is a poor, pathetic, disgusting loser who takes care of his ill mother with love and affection. He took his time to prepare her medicine and handed it to her, telling her to be careful because it may be too hot. The goats outside bleated for their breakfast, and Noor informed his mom that he would take them to the valley to eat some grass. He notices her concern and promises not to go past the village's boundary. He promised to get some wild rabbits, some nuts and seeds later in the day so they could make rabbit soup for dinner. His mom calls him close and cleans up his stained face, apologizing for being unable to help him with the house chores because of her condition and urging him to live life to the fullest. Later that evening, Noor makes some rabbit soup and serves a portion on a plate which he takes to his mom. He reaches her bedside and calls out to her, but he doesn't get any response. He becomes frantic, calling out to her so she can wake up, but she doesn't move an inch. The next day, he lays her in their backyard beside his dad's resting place with some flowers on her headstone. He shed tears to mourn her loss, but he suddenly wipes his eyes and strengthens his resolve. From that day, Noor starts fending for himself, caring for the family farm and hunting animals for food. He cares for the farm animals, selling their dairy products for money at the village market. He also read books to increase his knowledge about the world and everything in it. He felled trees in the forest and chopped up the logs. He also went fishing, being so skilled that he could catch fish with his bare hands. Though Noor could fend for himself, he was lonely because he lived in the house alone. One day, Noor reaches for the top of the bookshelf using a chair, but once he grabs the book, he suddenly loses his balance and falls over. He burns the night oil reading a book which reminds him of the time his dad told him a bedtime story about an adventurer. His dad told him about an adventurer who, with the help of his friends, took down a dragon and learned some magic spells from an old sorcerer. They cured a forest of decay and obtained a life elixir that cures all diseases from the king of the dead. Noor was engrossed when his father told him that the adventurer and his friends always raised their swords to strike down evil for the sake of other people, regardless of how dire the situation was. Noor was eager to hear the story and his father gladly obliged. Noor looked at the adventurer book and recalled his mother's words, telling him to live by his standard. The next day, after feeding the farm animals, he goes to his parents' place of rest and informs them that he will be leaving town for the first time. He tells them about his dream to become an adventurer and bids them farewell until he returns. Noor walks through the forest until he arrives at the boundary. He suddenly gets anxious but strengthens his resolve and walks through the boundary without looking back. At night, Noor makes a campfire to keep himself warm, but suddenly gets scared when he hears a monster's screech pierce through the night sky. Noor somehow survived the night and continued his journey the next morning. He moves through the forest, and he's surprised that he has arrived at a cliff overseeing the royal capital when he peers through a bush. He takes in the view of the city and then goes down to the main gate where he asks for directions from the guards. Noor walks into the capital, admiring everything from the building to the beautiful terraces. He hadn't seen so many people going about their daily lives before. He takes everything in as he walks through the city towards the guild. He spots an adventurer on his way, and his eyes immediately light up with admiration, strengthening his resolve to become an adventurer even more. Noor arrives at the guild, and he walks up to the reception desk. The receptionist tells him off, saying the guild isn't meant for kids, but Noor tells him he wants to become an adventurer. The receptionist tells him he would only make his parents worry about his safety, but Noor informed him that he was an orphan. The receptionist realizes he has no choice, so he tells Noor to head to the royal training school to receive lessons. The receptionist advises him to acquire skills like a sword or magic art before being placed in a suitable rank. Noor heads over to a sword master's house immediately after remembering how the heroes in the book took down the dragon with a single stroke of their sword. He arrives at the sword master's house and walks in to sign up as an apprentice. He joins the other apprentices to practice when an apprentice sword goes up in flames. The sword master gives a nod of approval, making the apprentice happy to graduate. Noor keeps practicing his sword skill, but after a few months, he still can't trigger any effect from his sword. The sword master tells him to give up trying to master the sword art because it is a colossal waste of time. The sword master advises him to choose a different career path because he only managed to parry a sword attack after months of training. He suggests a different training school to Noor, and Noor reluctantly agrees. He goes to a warrior training school to sharpen his fighting skills and begins training at the school with the other apprentices. After a few months, despite acknowledging his efforts, the schoolmaster tells him he can't continue at the school because he only managed to improve his skills slightly. The master didn't want a casualty on his hands, so he told Noor to try out another training school. Noor heads over to a hunter class school, but his apprenticeship is revoked because he can't handle delicate weaponry. He then heads over to a thief class training school, but after a few months, he is kicked out because he doesn't have the skills needed to be a spy. He heads over to a magic school, but the sorcerer kicks him out after months of training because all he could manage to conjure was a flicker of flame. The sorcerer was surprised that Noor was so magically deficient because he had never seen anyone like that. Noor then heads to the cleric school, but the chief cleric turns him down despite acknowledging that his low-level healing was impressive. Noor walks off dejectedly and returns to the receptionist with the news that he couldn't obtain a skill. The receptionist is surprised that Noor couldn't obtain a skill despite spending the full 3-month terms at each training school. Noor leaves the capital with his head hanging low after the receptionist tells him he can't be registered as an adventurer. Noor is disappointed that he isn't a prodigy and returns to his parents' place of rest to tell them he doesn't have talent for anything. He suddenly decides to train by himself and obtain some skills. He recalls his swordmaster advising him to keep practicing a skill until he masters it. Noor keeps practicing his parry skill, the only skill he could obtain during his sword training. He keeps training every day with his wooden sword, and after a year's worth of training, he can now evade 10 swords at once using his parry skill. After 3 years of training, Noor can evade 100 swords in one breath, but hasn't gained any new skills. He keeps training despite realizing that his hope of becoming an adventurer is a pipe dream. Noor keeps at his training despite making no progress on other skills. He continues training till his sword breaks in his hands. He vows to try harder and train more intensely until he becomes stronger. After more than a decade of training, Noor can parry more than 1,000 wooden swords in a single breath, but he has yet to obtain a new skill. The next day, he takes one last chance on his dream and heads to the guild in the royal capital. He lists his skills on the form, but the new receptionist isn't convinced of his capabilities because he only has one useful skill. The receptionist suggests Noor takes lessons from the training schools in the capital, but tells her he already knows about the school because he's been through all of them. The receptionist is surprised he's still unskilled despite going through all the training schools. The receptionist informs him that he can't register because he doesn't make the cut, and Noor wonders if there isn't a way around that. The old receptionist suddenly comes out, telling Noor not to pick on his new hire. Noor says hello to the old receptionist, and the receptionist takes some time before remembering Noor from several years ago. They catch up over a cup of tea, and Noor tells the old receptionist he couldn't learn any new skill despite training over a decade. The receptionist tells Noor he needs more than one recognizable skill to attain E rank, the lowest adventurer rank possible. Noor makes peace with the fact that he can't do anything but give up on his dreams. The old receptionist tells Noor about the F rank he can try out for if he obeys certain conditions. The conditions forbid him from taking any quests or gathering materials outside the city. He tells him he's restricted to miscellaneous tasks around the city. The old receptionist doesn't think the job description is worth the trouble, but to his surprise, Noor immediately accepts it. Noor registers as an F rank adventurer, and the receptionist hands him his license. Noor gladly accepts the license and goes around town doing menial jobs for people around the capital using his low-level magic spells to help him complete the tasks easily. He keeps practicing his parry skills in his free time and trying other lesser skills to delight the kids in the capital. Noor was glad he had finally achieved his dream of becoming an adventurer and being useful to people. He looks at his F-rank license with pride and decides not to go for a high rank because he would bite off more than he could chew. Noor diligently takes up menial jobs all around town to earn a living. He helps Grandma Stella clear out her sewers, and she thanks him for it, hoping to meet him again someday. Noor moves on to a construction site where he moves 10 times more bricks than the other workers. After a day's work, the employer gives him his paycheck, thanking him for helping them keep to the construction schedule. Noor is happy to give a helping hand, but he's distracted by a light source coming from a cave. He suddenly hears a cry for help, and he rushes into the cave without a moment's hesitation. He arrives at the scene to see a group of knights trying to protect a little girl from a giant minotaur monster. Noor can't believe that such monsters exist in real life. The knights try to protect the girl, but the minotaur takes down the leader with a single stroke of its axe. Noor rushes over to the leader and tries to help him, but realizes he can't help him. The other knights are enraged by this and try to get revenge for their fallen leader, but they meet the same fate. The girl is left at the mercy of the minotaur, but Noor suddenly swings into action. He uses his stone throw skill to draw the Minotaur's attention to him. The Minotaur is enraged and it rushes at him. Nor begins running, making the Minotaur chase him, but he suddenly stands his ground. As the Minotaur tries to strike him, he uses his parry skill, sending the Minotaur flying. The Minotaur regains its feet and it begins striking Nor with renowned vigor. Nor continues to parry its strikes, but his sword begins to chip, and he almost succumbs to the force of the Minotaur. Nor tries to look for the right moment to counterattack, but knows he won't take down the Minotaur because he doesn't have any attack skills. The Minotaur turns its attention to the girl and tries to take her down, but Nor uses his movement skill to close the gap and parry its strike. Nor's sword shatters, but his resolve to protect the frightened girl behind him doesn't waver, even if he can't become an adventurer. He recalls his father's story about the adventurers who always raised their swords to counter evil for the sake of their friends. The Minotaur strikes again with all its might, but Nor parries it with the broken sword, which sends the axe backwards, taking the Minotaur's head off its shoulders. Nor is disappointed that he barely survived the encounter with the Minotaur and realizes that he's not strong enough to become an adventurer. The sword crumbles to pieces in his hands, but the girl thanks him for protecting her from the Minotaur. Princess Lindbergh asks for his name, but he tells her that he's no one important and he walks away. More knights rush to the scene to meet the princess, happy that she is unharmed. Nor returns to the capital, reeling from his encounter with the Minotaur. He couldn't believe he had such a hard time taking down a random loose cow. He decides to train even more and become stronger. The knights clear out the scene of the battle, conducting repairs to the buildings that were damaged. The deceased are covered up and Princess Lindbergh says a prayer for their departure. Her escort, Inez, suddenly runs up to her because she is worried that the princess is hurt, but Princess Lindbergh assures her that she's alright. Inez regrets not accompanying her, but the princess tells her she doesn't need an escort when embarking on a trial for the right to the throne. She reminds Inez that she was the one who insisted on such conditions for the trials, and she tells her not to beat herself up for it. She apologizes for making her worry about her safety. Lord Dalkin approaches them, telling them to return to the castle because Lord Rain wants an audience. Princess Lindbergh returns to the castle with Lord Dalkin, who submits a report to Lord Rain. Lord Rain is surprised that a Minotaur was present in the cutty because they only inhabit the deepest part of the underworld. He figures out that someone summoned the Minotaur from the underworld, and Lord Dalkin tells him the Minotaur was summoned by a ring discovered on one of the merchant's fingers. The magic stone on the ring was of such high quality that it was nearly impossible to get in any market. Lord Rain wasn't convinced that a rich family was behind the Minotaur's appearance because it would be difficult for them to trap the monster in the ring. He tells Lord Rain that Oaken deduced that the ring originated from Dorida's kingdom because of the embedded crest. Lord Rain isn't surprised because Dorida's was always looking for ways to weaken them so he could overrun them with his forces. Lord Rain tells Dalkin they need to be careful because Dorida's left his crest behind so they would know he was behind it. He figures out that the ruler was hoping for an all-out war between them so they could finally get their hands on the relics of the Dungeon of the Lost, a very vital resource. Lord Rain sighs when he remembers the report about the man who saved the princess. He recounts how the man defeated the Minotaur in seconds with nothing but a broadsword. Dalkin recalls that the Corps told him the man disappeared before they could see him. Rain wonders about the secret man's identity, wanting to know more about such a powerful man. Nor returns to the guild the following morning, and the old receptionist is surprised that he's still breathing. Nor doesn't understand why he's surprised, and the old man recounts the event of the previous evening about a monster appearing at the entrance of the dungeon. The old man assumed that Nor was a victim because he heard it appeared around the construction site where he worked for the day. He tells Nor his fears worsened when he didn't see Nor around the guild after the event. Nor apologizes for causing the old man trouble. He explains that some shady characters were tailing him the previous night, so he went home. The old man tells him he was lucky he didn't encounter the monster. In his time, the old man was a rank adventurer, but knew he would have fallen victim to the Minotaur's power. Nor is surprised to learn that the Minotaur monster is that powerful, but he's glad he only bumped into a random axe-wielding cow. Nor asks the old man what happened to the monster. The old man tells Nor a mysterious man took down the monster with a single blow. Nor can't believe some people are so strong. The old man gives him payment for the job done the previous day and asks Nor how he feels about getting a decent job. Nor tells him he's content being an F-rank adventurer, but the old man tells him he can earn more money without giving a percentage to the guild if he gets a decent job. The princess suddenly appears behind Noor, glad to have found him again. She removes her disguise and Noor recognizes her from the previous night. She tells him she found him using her long-distance detection magic, and Noor thinks she's a thief-class adventurer. She tells him she's in the magic class, but knows all 6 skill systems. Noor is impressed by this, but she tells him there's nothing impressive about it because she only knows the basics and she's embarrassed about it. Noor doesn't understand why she's embarrassed when she tells him they need to continue their conversation outside after noticing that her presence drew attention from the adventurers in the guild. The old man suddenly grabs Noor and asks him what he did to offend the princess, but Noor tells him he didn't do anything that would get him in trouble. She tells him no one will eavesdrop on their conversation because she will use concealment and soundproofing skills. Noor asks the old man for advice and he tells him to go with the princess, advising him not to make any more mistakes. Noor follows the princess outside despite misunderstanding the old man's advice. Noor follows the princess past some guards who are having difficulty finding the man from the previous night. Noor points out to the princess that they are looking for someone, but she tells him not to worry because they can't be seen. They get to a secluded location, and the princess stops to thank Noor for saving her life the previous night. She tells him he saved more than just her life by taking down the monster, but Noor tells her that's a far stretch. He apologizes for interfering in her fight because he was sure she could handle the Minotaur with her outstanding skills. The princess tells him that's not true because she doesn't know how things would have turned out if he hadn't intervened. Noor accepts her thanks but tells him she wants to compensate him with a reward to show her gratitude. Noor tells her that he doesn't need anything else because her thanks were enough for him, but she tells him she has to reward him to thank him properly. She informs him that her father would also want to meet and thank him, but he declines because he's content with the thanks she already gave him. She asks him if he's having trouble with anything, but he tells her his life is all rainbows and sunflowers. She tells him her father could help him get some territory, but he tells her he has everything he needs. The princess suddenly becomes teary-eyed and tells Noor that he must accept whatever she grants him to show her gratitude. She tells him she won't move an inch unless he accepts her gratitude, which makes him remember his time at the cleric's door when he refused to leave the training cleric's house until he was trained. He sympathizes with the princess and agrees to meet her dad only if they don't do anything extravagant. She's happy that he has agreed and tells him to follow closely behind her, which surprises him because he didn't think he would have to meet her father immediately. She tells him she doesn't want anyone to spot them as she uses concealment and detection occlusion magic to hide their presence. She takes him to the castle, but Noor doesn't know it's the royal castle. He's impressed by how huge the place is and wonders if that's her house. Noor still hadn't figured out that the girl was the princess. She invites him in and he follows her into the castle. On their way to the main castle, the princess asks Noor for his name and he tells her. He asks her for her name and she takes a moment to apologize and then introduces herself as Lindbergh. She tells Noor to call her Lynn because that's her adventure name. They keep moving through the castle and Noor figures out that Noor comes from a wealthy family. He recalls the old man's advice telling him not to make dumb mistakes and he now understands what he means. Inez walks up to the princess to welcome her and Lynn asks her for her father's whereabouts. She informs Lynn that her father is discussing with Lord Rain in the audience chamber. She notices Noor and she asks Lynn about him. Lynn tells her Noor is the person who risked his life to save her. Inez is surprised to hear this and decides to accompany them to meet Lynn's father. Noor thinks Inez is the family maid and he wonders how she gets any chores done while wearing such heavy equipment. Inez leads them towards the audience chambers, but they're stopped by Gilbert who demands Noor's identity. Inez tells him to step aside because he's the princess's guest and Gilbert figures out that he's the talk of the town. Gilbert is disappointed because Noor isn't such an eyeful, but Inez tells him not to be rude. She tells him to accompany them to the chamber because she doesn't fully trust Noor and Gilbert agrees. The king is pissed that Doritas doesn't keep to his end of the deal after signing a peace treaty. Rain wasn't surprised because Doritas previously requested the rights to the dungeon from the king, but he declined. Doritas swore that the king would live to regret his words and Rain tells the king that may not be the only threat to their kingdom. The doors suddenly open and Lynn walks in with everyone accompanying her. Noor notices that the old man, sitting on the throne, is Lynn's father. Her brother, Rain, notices she's wearing her concealment cloak and he figures out that she went outside the castle gates. She tells him she went to look for the man who saved her life. She introduces Noor as the man who saved her the previous night. Noor apologizes for coming in such an unkempt state. He blames Lin for bringing him over in such a hurry, but the king tells him how he's dressed doesn't matter as he thanks him for coming. Noor tells the king he doesn't have the proper etiquette because he's not an aristocrat, and he apologizes in advance for anything informal that he does. The king is content to speak with him as a normal person, and he shakes his hand, humbly thanking him for saving his daughter. Noor accepts the king's gratitude, deciding to head home and have a hot bath, but the king tells him he can't let him go without rewarding him. The king asks him if he desires land or money, but Noor tells him he has no such desire. The king asks him if he wants rare treasures from the dungeon, but Noor tells him he doesn't want that either. He tells the king he doesn't want any fancy gift because his gratitude is more than enough. The king is surprised that Noor doesn't want treasures, so he tries to think of something that could interest Noor. He walks up to his throne and draws a huge sword which he shows to Noor, asking his thoughts. Rain advises the king against giving out the sword, but the king tells him it's better to give it out than to leave it at the mercy of time. He knew no one would notice it was missing if he swapped it with the replica that was made. He presents the sword to Noor, who figures out that the sword is priceless as soon as he grabs the hilt. He tells the king he can't accept his gift, but the king tells him it's a hand-me-down sword he picked up during his travels because he liked it. The king tells him to give it a swing, and Noor enhances his strength before giving the sword a swing which almost creates a storm in the room. Everyone is surprised that he can swing the sword with such force, and the king is even more surprised that he can swing it one-handed. Noor accepts the sword because he can swing it so easily though it's heavy. The king asks Noor for a favor, by helping him toughen Lin up, but Noor tells him he has nothing to teach her. Noor tells the king Lin would be the one to decide for herself if she wants to get stronger, and he advises him not to interfere with her decision. The king agrees with him, so Noor informs the king that he's leaving. The king thanks him again before bidding him farewell. Noor walks out with the sword which he thinks would be great for training, but he feels he got something valuable from the king. He suddenly notices that the sword would be a perfect fit to clear Grandma Stella's drainage, so he decides to try it out the next day. Inez suddenly stops him, telling him she wants a word with him. She informs Noor that her job is to protect Lin from any danger, and Noor figures out that she isn't a maid after all. Inez introduces herself to Noor as the vice captain of the family's warrior corps. She tells Noor she was appointed as the loyal shield of Lin since she was little, which means she must protect her at the cost of her life. She offers to help Noor with anything he needs because he saved her life by protecting Lin. Noor accepts her compliment, but she warns him not to get too informal with the king in the future because she won't be able to tolerate his disrespect. She asks him for his name because she didn't catch it earlier, and he introduces himself as Noor. The mention of his name draws a reaction from her, and Noor thinks he's done something wrong, but she tells him he hasn't. She tells him she's returning to her duties and leaves him. Noor turns to leave, but he's cornered by Gilbert, who challenges him to a duel before he leaves, and Noor realizes he won't be allowed to return home if things continue like that. Gilbert leads Noor to the training ground as Noor wonders why he challenged him to a duel. He was already exhausted from all his work, but they arrived at the training grounds and Gilbert told him they would be engaging in a mock battle. Noor is surprised because he was never talented enough to be assigned a sparring partner in the different training schools. Other people are practicing in the training room when they arrive, but they vacate the floor so Gilbert can have his match with Noor. Gilbert walks over to the weapons desk and he asks Noor to take his pick from the available weapons. Noor picks up a wooden sword, eager to get into the mock battle with Gilbert. They both face off at the center of the training room. Noor worries that he won't be able to match Noor's skills, but decides to take that as a chance to train with someone more skillful than him. He wants to utilize this opportunity because it's the best he has gotten since mastering his parry skill. The spectators wonder how Noor was so unfortunate that he got into a mock battle with Gilbert. They are sure Gilbert will smack him around until he passes on to the afterlife. Gilbert announces the start of the match, his face suddenly getting serious. He swings his wooden staff at Noor, who easily sidesteps his attack. Gilbert takes a moment and then strikes at Noor several times in quick succession, but Noor dodges all his strikes without as much as a scratch. Noor was impressed with how polished Gilbert's movement was. He knew Gilbert must have trained endlessly to get himself to such a flawless level. Though Noor was impressed with how fluid and measured his movement was, he wondered why his attacks were so slow. Noor keeps dodging Gilbert's attacks easily and then figures out that Gilbert is holding back because he doesn't want to use his full strength against a low-level opponent. Noor suddenly calls a timeout, which surprises Gilbert as he tells him not to hold back so much even if he's trying to go easy on him. Gilbert isn't sure if he is holding back because Noor is an ordinary human, but he decides to honor Noor's word. He suddenly starts attacking Noor with renewed vigor, and Noor acknowledges that he's faster, but he notices that Gilbert always leaves himself open as he dodges his attack. Noor concludes that Gilbert is trying to lure him into close quarters so he can have the advantage, so he decides not to take the bait. Gilbert is fuming internally, wondering why none of his attacks are connecting. He decides to try a new attack pattern by feinting, which makes Noor dodge away. He thinks he has Noor dead to rights as he strikes with his staff, but Noor somehow dodges his attack. Noor tells him he can speed up his attack because he can handle faster attacks, but Gilbert isn't pleased to hear this. Noor contemplates that Gilbert is already fighting at maximum power and realizes he has gotten stronger. Noor is hopeful that he can win the duel, but suddenly sees sparks as Gilbert attacks him with a super attack. Gilbert is sure that his attack found its mark, but Noor dodges it at the very last moment. While Gilbert is surprised that Noor dodged his attack, Noor concedes, accepting defeat to Gilbert. He leaves the castle, grateful that Gilbert didn't mow him down. Meanwhile, the spectators wonder how Noor dodged Gilbert's super attack. They conclude that the wind of Gilbert's attack pushed Noor out of the way because they couldn't believe someone could dodge it. They are sure he would have been mincemeat if Gilbert used a real spear. Gilbert sits quietly in a corner, recalling the first day he held a spear. From that day, he knew he had the talent to handle a spear in battle. He took down his opponent in a duel, to the admiration of spectators in a village he visited, who gathered to witness the match. He trained constantly to polish his techniques, but was always bored because he couldn't find anyone strong enough to thrill him in battle. The village head asked him if he enjoyed the village bit. Noor told him the fight was the same as usual. The village head recognized him as the man who went to different areas looking for strong opponents. The village head informed him that no villager could match his strength. Gilbert told the head he had to search for strong opponents because he had defeated every worthy opponent in the capital. He left the capital with high hopes that he would meet someone stronger. The village head informed him about summons from warring countries. He told him strong troops were being summoned and advised him to try out and see if he would encounter someone strong. Gilbert returned to the capital where he kept hunting demons until he heard that someone strong joined the military corps. He challenged them all to a duel, but took them all down easily. He still wasn't satisfied as he craved someone who could present him with a real challenge. He was so bored that he was almost going insane. He couldn't believe he was surrounded by such weaklings. One day when he was resting under a tree, the sword master approached him, and he expressed his boredom to the sword master. The sword master suggested he duel with Inez, but Gilbert told him he would come out on top if they did, though he admitted she was strong. Gilbert was disappointed there weren't more people like the swordmaster and figured out that the swordmaster was bored out of his mind since he had to train people who weren't worth their salt. The swordmaster told him he was just doing his duty to protect the capital until someone who surpassed him would appear. Gilbert was hopeful he was alive to witness such a spectacle because he didn't know how long he would survive the boredom. Gilbert was enthusiastic about getting to know the man who defeated the Minotaur single-handedly, but after their duel, he was puzzled by Noor's ways. He recalls how he had no interest in material things and how discourteous he was during his audience with the king. Gilbert sized Noor up during the audience and didn't think Noor could take down the Minotaur, but after their mock battle, he was more than convinced of his abilities. He was sure his ultimate ability would bring Noor to his knees, but he was humbled after Noor dodged his attack. He had no idea how he dodged the attack and was ready to accept defeat when Noor called the fight off. Noor was humiliated that Gilbert was holding back because they were fighting in front of his subordinates. Gilbert didn't understand why Noor called the fight to an end, and he tried to convince him otherwise, to no avail. He took his gift and left the training room, hoping to meet Gilbert again. Gilbert suddenly noticed some cracks on the floor, and he realized that Noor somehow evaded his technique. Gilbert is glad things are finally getting exciting in the capital because he has found someone who can evade his ultimate technique at full power. Noor heads back home with his head hanging low after witnessing Gilbert's amazing technique. He kicks himself for being too quick to praise himself, thinking he has gotten stronger. He used his physical enhancement and feather step skills to get out of Gilbert's range, but he knew that he wouldn't have made it if Gilbert didn't hold back. Noor is grateful that Gilbert helped put his pride in check by humbling him even while holding back his true powers. Noor decides to toughen up even more after Gilbert just proved to him that he's still weak. The following day, Gilbert clears out the town's drainage with the broadsword. He's surprised by how efficiently the sword clears out the drainage, easily taking out the stubborn stuff that usually sticks to the bottom of the drain. The villagers are surprised by how quickly and effectively Noor cleared the grandma's drain, and they commend him for it. Noor is grateful to Lin's dad for giving him the sword as another villager asks him for his drainage cleaning services. Though his drainage clearing job is going well, Noor is worried because the construction site closed after the Minotaur incident, which rid him of his soil hauling job. He's worried he won't get more jobs if jobs dry up in the capital. He thinks of ways to utilize the broadsword to the villagers' benefit, but everything he thinks of is worth more than he can afford. He's disappointed he couldn't obtain more skills from the training schools despite attending them all to due term. Lin suddenly walks up to him in his relaxation spot in the forest, and they exchange greetings. Noor recalls Inee's threat, so he addresses Lin formally, but she tells him to address her by her adventurer name. Noor wonders why she came looking for him in the forest, and she tells him the guildmaster directed her to his location after she came looking for him at the guild. Noor concludes that Noor used her special skill to find him because he didn't tell the guildmaster his exact location. He asks her why she came looking for him, and she asks him to accept her as his page. Noor doesn't know the duties of a page, so Lin explains it to him, telling him she would be his apprentice. She tells him she just wants to hand around him and promises not to cause him trouble. Noor turns down her request, which makes her wonder if she offended him during their first meeting. She promises to be useful to him, telling him of her achievement as the youngest person to gain skills in all 6 skill disciplines. Noor tells her he has nothing to teach her and she has nothing to offer him because he can do everything he needs to be done. Lin tries to entice him with the fees he would be paid as her instructor, but he tells her he's not interested. Lin tries to sell herself to Noor so he can accept her as his apprentice, but he tells her he has no use for her. Lin is sad that Noor doesn't think she would be useful, so she decides to prove her worth to him. She brings out her wand and then summons icicles, which she melts completely with flame magic. She tells Noor her flame magic is the highest magic level she can use. She demonstrates her thief skill by drawing out her dagger, which cuts through a tree behind her. She then uses her magic sword to unleash Divine Slash, the sacred class skill of a swordsman, which is very effective against undead creatures. She wants to continue demonstrating her abilities, but Noor stops her. She mistakes this as confirmation that Noor has accepted her as his page, but he tells her he hasn't. Noor wonders why she was trying so hard to become his apprentice. He feels bad for himself after witnessing her abilities, and he wonders why she thinks he's a suitable person to become her tutor. He tells her the skills she demonstrated proved that there was nothing he could teach her. Lin tries to convince Noor that she can be useful to him, and he decides to show her how skillfully retarded he is. He shows her his tiny flame skill, and she is surprised. She returns to the castle, remembering tales from the training schools about a young boy without skills. Everyone at the training schools thought the stories were a fairy tale because they couldn't believe someone could be so powerless. She also didn't believe that a 12-year-old would go through the rigorous courses of all 6 schools without dropping out when even men struggled to survive for 3 days. She recalls Oaken showing her his tiny flame skill, but his tiny flame was larger than usual. Oaken told her he had over 200 years to practice his magic, which was why his tiny flame was larger than average. Linus uses her tiny flame magic and wonders if she will eventually make hers bigger. She was surprised that when Noor used his tiny flame magic, his flame was larger than Oaken's, who had practiced magic longer than Noor had lived. He told her that his other 5 class skills are low level, just like his magic skill, and he asked if she now understood why he couldn't accept her as his page. Liney was sure that Noor's other skills were extraordinary and wondered why she showed off some high-level skills she had memorized. She recalls how Noor stopped the Minotaur's attack, but she's surprised that he never bragged about his power to anyone. She realizes that Noor won't yield to anyone because he's strong physically and mentally. She vows to learn to achieve strength like that because she wants to support her brother and lead the capital to greatness when it's their turn to rule. Later that evening, Noor finishes his dinner and comes out of the diner when Lin suddenly approaches. She tells him she understands that he has been trying to teach her to forsake her pride and immaturity. She makes a personal vow to follow Noor's footsteps until he finds her worthy to be acknowledged as his page. She calls him her instructor because the values and convictions she and her family had sought for generations reside in him. She doesn't want to pass up on such a golden opportunity, but Noor wonders why she is so persistent. He prays for a way out of his predicament.